She stood at the doorway, clutching the invitation that could change everything. Her family's words echoed in her mind. "You'll embarrass yourself if you go." But something deep inside whispered, "This time, don't let fear decide." What happened that night? No one in the town could ever forget. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching? The wind brushed softly against the small wooden house at the edge of town, carrying with it the sounds of laughter and music from far away. The sounds of a world that always seemed too distant for Lena Williams. She sat by her window, sketching quietly in her worn notebook, while her family chatted in the living room, discussing the upcoming community event that everyone in town was excited about. Everyone except her. For as long as Lena could remember, she had been told she was not enough. Not smart enough to stand out, not pretty enough to be noticed, not confident enough to belong. Her mother often said it out of love, or what she thought was love. "Lena, you always make things awkward. Just stay home, dear. You don't need to be seen by everyone." Her older sister, Clara, was the opposite, graceful, talkative, admired by all. Their parents adored her, often introducing her proudly at every family gathering. Lena had grown used to being the quiet one in the corner, the girl who smiled politely but spoke little. That evening, as her mother and Clara talked about the upcoming community event, an annual celebration where people shared ideas, performed talents, or presented community projects, Lena sat silently, pretending not to care, but deep inside something stirred. Every year she had dreamed of being part of it, of standing on that stage and speaking about something that mattered. This year she had an idea, a small project she had been working on quietly for months. She wanted to start a reading circle for children who couldn't afford books or lessons. It was simple but meaningful. She wanted to share it, to inspire others to help. When she finally gathered enough courage to mention it, her mother laughed lightly, as if brushing off a child's fantasy. "Oh, Lena," she said, shaking her head, "people go there to see successful folks, not quiet dreamers with small hobbies." "You'll only embarrass yourself," Clara smirked. "Yeah, Lena, you'd probably faint halfway through your speech. Maybe let others handle it. You're not the type for crowds." The words hit harder than Lena expected. She nodded quietly and excused herself, retreating to her room as laughter filled the house again. The moment the door closed, the smile vanished from her face. She sat on her bed, staring at her reflection in the small mirror, the same tired eyes, the same hesitant expression. But that night, as she looked at herself, she saw something else, a flicker, a quiet rebellion, a whisper inside that said, "What if they're wrong?" Lena reached for her old notebook again. Between sketches and half-written lines, she began drafting what she might say if she ever stood on that stage. Her handwriting trembled at first, but as words filled the page, they began to steady. She wrote about dreams, about how small acts of kindness could change a community, about children who deserved hope, about how every voice mattered, even the quiet ones. Days passed, and Lena kept her secret alive. Every night after everyone slept, she practiced in front of her mirror, her voice soft but determined. She timed her pauses, corrected her tone, and even imagined the applause that might come someday. But the fear was still there, that crippling fear of disappointing her family. Sometimes while practicing, she'd stop suddenly, hearing her mother's words echo in her mind. "You'll only embarrass yourself." One afternoon, at the local library where she volunteered twice a week, Lena met Mr. Harris, a retired teacher with a gentle smile and a sharp mind. He had been observing her for a while. "You're always reading about how to help others," he said one day, leaning over the desk. "But when will you let others see how much you care?" Lena laughed nervously. "I'm not good at speaking, Mr. Harris. People don't really listen to someone like me." He looked at her for a long moment, then said something that stayed with her forever. "Confidence isn't born when others believe in you, Lena. It's born the moment you decide to believe in yourself." That night, his words replayed in her head over and over again. She realized that maybe, just maybe, she didn't need permission to be herself. The thought scared her and thrilled her, The week before the event, posters appeared all over town. Annual community gala, share your vision. Everyone was preparing. Clara was helping with decorations. Her mother was baking pies for the competition. When they asked Lena if she'd attend, she simply said, maybe. Inside, though, she had already decided. She was going, and she was going to speak. But when she mentioned her plan the day before the event, the storm began. You can't be serious, her mother said, her voice filled with disbelief. Do you even know what you're getting yourself into? Those people are professionals. You'll embarrass our family. I'm not trying to compete, Lena replied softly. I just want to share an idea, something I care about. Clara crossed her arms. People will laugh, Lena. They'll see how nervous you get. Why can't you just stay home? It's not like anyone's waiting to hear from you. The words stung, but this time she didn't retreat. She stood silently, letting their voices fade in the background. Later that night, when the house fell quiet, she stood in front of the mirror one last time. Her eyes were red from crying, but there was strength beneath the tears. Maybe they'll laugh, she whispered to her reflection. Maybe I'll stumble, but I'll still go. The next morning, the sun rose with a golden calm. Lena dressed in a simple white dress she hadn't worn in years, one her grandmother had gifted her before she passed away. Wear this when you feel ready to start something new, her grandmother had said. Lena took a deep breath, brushed her hair, and smiled faintly. Her heart raced, but she felt light, freer than she had in years. As she walked toward the community hall, she could hear music and chatter echoing from a distance. Her palms were sweating, her throat tight. But with every step, her fear began to fade, replaced by something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. When she arrived, people turned their heads. Some recognized her, the quiet Williams girl who rarely attended social events. She greeted a few familiar faces with a soft smile. The hall was beautifully decorated with golden lights, laughter, and music filling the air. For the first time, Lena didn't feel invisible. She felt present. As she sat waiting for her turn to speak, she closed her eyes and whispered a silent prayer. Not for success, not for recognition, but for courage. The courage to finally show the world the real Lena Williams. And deep down, she knew this night would change everything. The morning after the community event announcement, the world outside Lena's window looked the same sleepy town. The same noise of bicycles and morning chatter, yet inside her everything was shifting. She had made her decision, and it felt like a secret fire was burning in her chest. For the first time in her life, she wasn't waiting for anyone's permission to exist. That decision, however, came with a heavy silence. Her family still hadn't spoken to her properly since the argument. At breakfast, her mother busied herself with dishes, while Clara scrolled on her phone, pretending Lena wasn't even there. The clinking of plates and the hum of the refrigerator filled the void that words used to occupy. Lena wanted to say something, anything, but she knew that every word would lead to another storm. So she ate quietly, then left the house with her bag and her notebook. The library had become her sanctuary, a place where time slowed down and judgment didn't exist. The tall windows let the light spill across the wooden tables, and the faint smell of old books made her feel safe. That's where she met Mr. Harris again. He was sitting at his usual corner table, surrounded by books and notes, sipping his coffee like it was part of some sacred ritual. He looked up and smiled when she entered. "Ah, Miss Williams, the quiet fighter returns," he said, his voice warm and teasing. Lena smiled shyly. "Maybe not a fighter yet, but I'm trying. That's how every fighter begins," he said. Trying. They spent hours talking that day. Mr. Harris told her stories from his teaching days, how some of his brightest students were the ones who doubted themselves most. "The world likes to celebrate loud voices," he said, "but real change often comes from those who listen first." He looked at her then, with the kind of gaze that sees beyond surface. "You've got something important to say, Lena. You just have to trust that it matters." Those words wrapped around her heart like armor. That week, Lena practiced harder than ever. Every evening, after dinner, she would lock herself in her room and stand in front of her mirror. She rehearsed her speech over and over, adjusting her tone, steadying her hands, learning to breathe through the nerves. Sometimes she stumbled over words, sometimes she forgot her lines completely, and sometimes she'd just stare at herself and whisper, "You can do this." But there were nights she wanted to give up. Nights when her mother's voice echoed in her head, "You'll embarrass yourself." The weight of those words was heavier than any fear of the stage. One night, after practicing until her voice cracked, Lena sank to the floor and cried silently. She wondered if maybe they were right. Maybe she was chasing something foolish. She didn't even know if anyone would listen. The next day, she met Mr. Harris again. He noticed her red eyes before she even spoke. "You've been fighting ghosts again," he said softly. She nodded. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." He leaned forward. "You're already stronger than you think. Do you know what most people never realize? Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward even when your knees are shaking." Lena blinked away tears and smiled faintly. "I guess I'm shaking a lot then." "Good," he said, chuckling. "That means you're alive." That afternoon he surprised her with a gift, a small silver pendant shaped like a feather. "For luck," he said. "And to remind you that even light things can rise high." Lena clutched it like a treasure. She wore it every day from then on, even under her plain sweaters. It became her silent promise to herself, a reminder of what she was fighting for. Days turned into nights, and the event drew closer. The community buzzed with excitement. Posters were everywhere, and social media was full of people announcing their performances, singers, dancers, poets, business owners. Lena scrolled through them quietly, her heart racing faster with each passing day. She wasn't famous, she wasn't rich, she wasn't extraordinary, but she was ready. One afternoon, while helping at the library, a few children gathered around her, curious about what she was doing. They had seen her organizing books and making notes about her reading circle. One of them, a little boy with messy hair and bright eyes, asked, "Miss Lena, are you going to teach us stories one day?" Lena looked at him, surprised. "Would you like that?" He nodded eagerly. "I love stories, but we don't have many books at home." Something shifted in her chest. In that moment, everything made sense. She realized this wasn't just about proving herself to her family or the town. It was about them, about the little hearts waiting for someone to believe in them. That night, Lena sat by her window, the moonlight reflecting off her pendant. She opened her notebook and wrote one final note beneath her speech. "This isn't about perfection. It's about courage. Even if no one claps, I'll still stand tall." The next morning, she went for a walk through the park to clear her mind. She passed families, couples, laughter, and for once, she didn't feel like an outsider. The air felt different. The sky seemed larger. She realized that confidence wasn't something that came all at once. It was built. One breath, one step, one choice at a time. When she returned home, Clara was in the living room, curling her hair in front of the mirror. "You're still going, aren't you?" she asked, her tone somewhere between disbelief and annoyance. "Yes," Lena said calmly. Clara turned to her. "You really think you'll impress anyone?" Lena took a deep breath and smiled softly. "I'm not going to impress anyone, Clara. I'm going to be myself." "That's enough." Her sister didn't reply, just stared, as if seeing her differently for the first time. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She sat by her desk, staring at her speech, reading it one last time. Every word felt like a piece of her, every pause, every emotion. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was what mattered most. She placed her notebook beside her and closed her eyes, whispering, "Tomorrow I'll show up for me." Morning came too soon. The sound of birds filled the air, and the first rays of sun fell through her curtains. She got ready slowly, her hands trembling as she brushed her hair and tied the silver feather around her neck. The mirror reflected not the shy, uncertain girl of yesterday, but a woman who had finally chosen herself. Outside, the world moved like any other day, cars passing, children laughing, neighbors greeting, unaware that, for Lena Williams, this day was the beginning of something new. The quiet girl everyone overlooked was about to take her first step toward the stage that would change her life. And deep inside, beneath all the nerves and fear, She carried a truth that no one could take away. She didn't need to be the loudest to be heard. She just needed to believe her voice was worth listening to. The evening sky was painted in shades of rose and gold as the town hall came alive with chatter, lights, and the hum of anticipation. It was the night of the community event, the night everyone had been waiting for. People from every corner of the neighborhood gathered, dressed in their best, exchanging smiles and greetings. Music floated through the air, laughter spilled across the courtyard, and the smell of baked pies and flowers created an atmosphere of celebration. And amidst that glow, walking slowly toward the entrance with trembling hands and steady eyes, was Lena Williams. She could feel her heartbeat echo in her ears. Every step on the cobblestone path felt heavier than the last. Her dress, a soft shade of lavender, flowed gently around her, simple, elegant, not designed to impress but to express peace. Around her neck hung the silver feather pendant, glimmering faintly beneath the lights. It wasn't jewelry. It was armor. She stood outside the tall glass doors of the community hall and took a deep breath. Through the transparent panels, she could see familiar faces. People she grew up around, people who used to pass her by without a second glance. They looked radiant and confident. She almost turned back, but something inside her whispered, "You've already come this far. Don't stop now." As she stepped inside, the warmth of the room enveloped her. The floor sparkled under chandeliers, and the buzz of conversation filled every corner. A few people turned their heads when she entered. Some whispered, surprised to see the quiet Williams girl here alone. Others smiled politely, not sure what to say. For years, she had blended into the background, but tonight, something about her presence made people pause. At the registration desk, a young volunteer greeted her. "Good evening, miss." "Williams," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Lena Williams. I'm presenting in the Ideas and Projects segment." The girl checked her list and smiled. "Yes, of course. You're the final speaker tonight. Please take a seat, we'll call you soon." The final speaker. The words made Lena's pulse quicken. The night would end with her. She found a seat near the side of the hall, clutching her notebook like a lifeline. The event began with music, a local band playing cheerful tunes, followed by dance performances, poetry recitations, and short speeches. Applause erupted after each act, echoing through the hall. As the evening went on, Lena's nerves returned. She rehearsed her lines silently, her lips moving without sound. Her palms were sweaty, her heart racing. For a moment she wondered if she should sneak out before her turn came. But then her hand brushed the feather pendant around her neck, and she remembered Mr. Harris's words. "Bravery is moving forward, even when your knees are shaking," she whispered under her breath. "Okay, Lena, breathe, just breathe." When the host finally called her name, the sound seemed to travel in slow motion. Our final speaker for the evening, someone who reminds us that even the quietest voices can hold the loudest dreams. Please welcome Miss Lena Williams. The hall fell into polite applause. Lena stood, legs trembling, notebook in hand. The stage lights felt blinding as she climbed the steps, each one feeling like a test of courage. She reached the podium and looked out, rows of faces, expectant, curious, some indifferent. The room seemed enormous, the silence stretching. She opened her notebook, but her hands shook too much to read. For a second, panic gripped her. She could hear her mother's voice in her mind, "You'll embarrass yourself." And then another voice, warmer. "Kinder," whispered back, "you're already enough." Lena took a deep breath and closed the notebook. "I was supposed to read something tonight," she began, her voice trembling. "But I think I'd rather speak from the heart." A few murmurs rippled through the audience. But she continued, her tone growing steadier. "For most of my life, I believed I didn't have a voice worth listening to. I thought confidence was something you were born with, like beauty or talent. But then I realized confidence isn't about being fearless. It's about standing here, even when every part of you wants to run away." A soft hush filled the hall. "I came here tonight to share an idea, a small one maybe, but small things can still make a difference." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. I want to start a community reading circle for children who don't have access to books. I've seen too many little faces light up just by hearing a story. And I believe stories can change how we see ourselves, how we see the world. Someone in the front row nodded. Another person smiled. Lena's voice grew stronger. I know I'm not famous or experienced. I'm just someone who wants to try. And maybe that's enough. Because real change doesn't always start with loud speeches or big crowds. Sometimes it starts with one person deciding to believe they matter. For a moment there was silence, a sacred kind of stillness. Then, as if the air itself exhaled, the audience broke into applause. It wasn't polite applause this time. It was thunderous, heartfelt, rising from the back of the hall to the front. Lena froze, her eyes wide, tears welling up. She had dreamed of this moment, imagined it countless times, but nothing compared to the reality of it. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't the quiet one or the awkward one. She was seen. After she stepped off the stage, people came up to her, strangers, teachers, even business owners. One woman from the local school board said, "We'd love to help you start that reading circle. The kids will adore it." Another offered to donate books. Lena smiled through her tears, thanking each one of them. And then, in the corner of the room, she noticed someone she hadn't expected, Clara. Her sister stood near the doorway, half hidden, watching silently. Their eyes met. Clara's expression softened, pride flickering beneath guilt. She mouthed the words Lena never thought she'd hear. "I'm proud of you." Lena's throat tightened. She wanted to run to her, to hug her, but she stayed still, giving her sister a small nod, forgiveness without words. Later that night, after the event ended and the hall began to empty, Lena stepped outside. The air was cool, and the stars shimmered above like distant witnesses. She leaned against the railing, looking up at the sky, her heart full and quiet. She didn't need validation anymore. She didn't need anyone's approval. For the first time in her life, she had shown up, fully, completely as herself. Behind her, the doors of the hall closed softly. Music faded, laughter drifted away, and all that remained was the sound of the wind. Lena smiled to herself, whispering, "I did it." And somewhere deep within, she knew this was not the end. It was the beginning of a life she had only just begun to live. The morning sun rose gently over the rooftops, painting the small town in hues of gold and amber. The world outside seemed ordinary. Children rushing to school, the smell of bread from the bakery, neighbors watering their gardens. But for Lena Williams, nothing was ordinary anymore. Everything felt new. Every sound, every color, every breath carried a quiet kind of victory. She stood by her window, still in her nightgown, holding a cup of tea as she replayed last night's memories in her mind. The stage lights, the applause, the tears in people's eyes, it all felt like a dream. She had faced her greatest fear and walked out stronger than ever. For the first time in years, she wasn't scared of being seen. She had finally learned what it meant to belong, not to others, but to herself. Her phone buzzed on the table. Messages poured in. Congratulations, praise, offers to collaborate. A local journalist wanted to interview her. The community center wanted her to lead the first reading circle that very weekend. Lena stared at the screen in disbelief, her lips curving into a slow, humble smile. Then her mother's name appeared on the caller ID. For a moment, she hesitated. She wasn't sure what to expect, more criticism, maybe awkward silence, but she answered anyway. "Hello, Mom?" There was a pause, the sound of soft breathing on the other end. "Lena," her mother's voice was quieter than usual. "I saw the pictures. Everyone's talking about you. The paper said you made quite an impression." Lena didn't know what to say. She waited. Her mother continued, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't realize how much this meant to you. I'm sorry for not believing in you. I thought I was protecting you from disappointment, but maybe I was just afraid you'd prove me wrong." Lena's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't from pain. "It's okay, Mom, I understand. We all act from fear sometimes. I'm proud of you," her mother whispered. Those 4 words, simple, fragile, overdue, healed something inside her that had been broken for years. Lena smiled, her heart lighter than it had ever been. "Thank you, Mom. That means more than you know." After the call, she looked at the feather pendant resting against her chest. The sunlight caught it, sending a shimmer across her skin. It felt like a symbol of everything she'd become. Resilient, free, unafraid. Later that day, Lena met with the community board to discuss her project. The same hall that once terrified her now felt like home. People greeted her warmly, their faces filled with respect. The principal of the local elementary school shook her hand. "Your idea has inspired many of us," he said. "We want to host your reading sessions here. You'll have our full support." Lena's heart swelled. "Thank you. I just want to give children the hope I wish I had when I was their age." Over the next few weeks, her idea grew beyond her imagination. Volunteers joined. Parents donated books. Even Clara helped organize materials, her once dismissive attitude replaced with admiration. "I can't believe I ever doubted you," Clara said one afternoon while arranging books on the shelves. "You've become someone I look up to," Lena smiled gently. "You don't have to believe in me, Clara. Just believe in yourself, too." Every Saturday, the small reading circle came alive. Children gathered in bright chairs, their eyes wide with wonder, as Lena told them stories, tales of heroes, dreamers, and quiet courage. Some of them couldn't read yet, but they listened intently, their imaginations taking flight. One afternoon, as the session ended, a little girl tugged at Lena's sleeve. "Miss Lena, when I grow up, I want to tell stories like you," she said shyly. Lena knelt down, her eyes warm. "You will, sweetheart. And when you do, remember, your voice is your magic. Never hide it." Those moments became her greatest reward. It wasn't about recognition anymore. It was about meaning, about leaving something behind that could outlive her fear. Months passed, and the reading circle became a beloved part of the community. People who once overlooked her now came to her for advice. The mayor invited her to speak at local schools. A small grant was approved to expand her project into neighboring towns. Each milestone reminded her that greatness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. But Lena never let the attention change her. She still walked to the library every morning, greeting everyone with the same gentle smile. She still spent quiet evenings by her window, journaling her thoughts, watching the world with gratitude. One evening, as she packed up after another session, Mr. Harris visited her. His steps were slower now, his hair whiter, but his eyes carried the same wisdom. "I always knew you'd do it," he said softly. "But you didn't just find your voice, Lena. You helped others find theirs, too." Lena's throat tightened. "You were the first person who believed I had one." "Thank you for that," he chuckled. "All I did was hand you the mirror. You did the rest." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples, Lena stood outside the library, looking at the children laughing in the yard. She realized something profound, that sometimes the very people who try to silence you are the ones who fear your strength the most. And sometimes love means forgiving them anyway. That night she returned home to find her mother and Clara waiting with dinner. The atmosphere was warm, filled with laughter and stories. For the first time in years, it felt like family again, not perfect but real. After dinner, Lena stepped outside to the porch. The air was crisp, the stars shimmering above. She closed her eyes, feeling the cool breeze against her face. She remembered how it all began, the fear, the doubt, the tears. And now, standing there, she whispered to the wind, "Thank you for not letting me listen to them." Because if she had, she would have missed the life waiting beyond her fear. A car passed by, and she caught her reflection faintly in its window, calm, radiant, self-assured. She barely recognized the woman she had become. Somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of children laughing reached her ears. The children she now taught, the voices she'd helped to grow. And in that sound, she heard the echo of her own journey, once silenced, now beautifully alive. She smiled to herself, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Not of sadness, but gratitude," she whispered softly. "One day You'll walk into a room and turn all the heads, not because they see you, but because you finally see yourself. And with that, Lena turned off the porch light and stepped inside, ready to face tomorrow, not as the girl who once doubted her worth, but as the woman who became her own light.